The docking bay of Outpost Sigma 7 smelled like burnt metal and recycled air. Humans in grease-stained jumpsuits hurried past, ignoring the crumpled figure lying motionless near a pile of discarded cargo crates. Commander Vera of the Zarathian Empire was not used to being ignored. Her once imposing armored suit was cracked, its biomechanical systems fried, leaving her paralyzed, a death sentence for a warrior of her status. The Zarathians had left her behind without a second thought. Efficiency over sentiment, that was their way. A shadow fell over her. She expected another human to step over her like the others, weak, fearful things. Instead, Superman knelt beside her, his crimson cape pooling around him like spilled starlight. "You're not dying today," he said. Vera's golden eyes burned with defiance. "You think you can save me?" Her voice was a blade's edge, sharp but brittle. Superman studied her ruined armor, the faint flicker of her neural implants. "I fixed worse." She scoffed or tried to. The movement sent a jolt of pain through her locked muscles. "Your primitive medicine cannot heal Zarathian tech." He tilted his head, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "Good thing I'm not just human then." Before she could retort, he slid one arm beneath her back, the other under her knees, and lifted her effortlessly. Vera stiffened. No one carried a Zarathian warrior like this. It was undignified. "You put me down. Or what?" His voice was warm, teasing. "You'll stab me?" "I would if I could," she hissed. He laughed, and the sound was annoyingly pleasant. Noted. The humans in the bay froze as Superman carried her past. Whispers followed. "That's a Zarathian. He's helping her. They'll glass the station for this." Vera's pride flared. "They fear you'll start a war." Superman didn't slow. "Wars start when people let others die." She had no answer for that. The med bay was small, sterile. Superman laid her on the examination table with surprising gentleness. The station's doctor, a wiry human with cybernetic eyes, backed away. "I can't treat her. Her systems are too advanced." Superman crossed his arms. "Then we improvise." Vera watched him, this strange, infuriatingly confident man who refused to accept the inevitable. His eyes were too blue, like Earth's sky must be, a color she'd only seen in stolen data files. "You're wasting your time," she muttered. He leaned in, just a little too close, and whispered, "Funny. That's what they told me when I first learned to fly." Her breath hitched, not from pain, but something else. Then the alarms blared. A voice crackled over the comms. "Zarathian warship just jumped into the sector. They're hailing us." The doctor paled. "They're coming for her." Superman didn't move. His hand, warm and steady, rested on Vera's wrist, a silent promise. She glared up at him. "Now do you see? This is why my people leave the weak behind." He grinned. "Good thing I'm not weak." And just like that, the most dangerous creature in the galaxy decided she hated him. And maybe, just a little, she didn't. The medbay lights flickered as the distant thrum of the Zarathian warship's engines vibrated through the station's hull. The doctor had already fled, leaving Superman alone with the furious, half-paralyzed alien warrior who looked like she wanted to murder him with her teeth. Vera's golden eyes burned. "You should run." Superman didn't even glance at the door. "Not really my style." She strained against her locked muscles, a low growl escaping her throat. "They'll kill you." Slowly. He tapped a finger against his chin, pretending to consider it. I'd had worse first dates." Her glare could have melted steel. "This is not a date." "Could have fooled me," he said, flashing that infuriating grin. Abandoned warrior, dramatic rescue, impending doom. Classic romance setup. Vera would have thrown something at him if she could move. Instead, she watched, against her will, obviously, as he scanned her armor's diagnostics with those piercing blue eyes, his brow furrowed in concentration. His fingers brushed the shattered neural port, and for a second, his touch was almost gentle. She hated it. "Your biotech's fried," he muttered. "But the core pathways are intact. If we can reroute." "You know nothing of Zarathian systems," she snapped. He arched an eyebrow. "You'd be surprised what I know." Before she could retort, The station's AI blared, warning, Sarathian boarding party inbound. Vera smirked. Too late, human. Superman straightened. Nah, just dramatic timing. Then he did something unthinkable. He scooped her up again. Put me down, she snarled, her pride screaming louder than her injuries. Would you rather I drag you by the ankle? I'd rather you leave me to die with dignity. Yeah, well, he adjusted his grip, his arms warm and annoyingly secure around her. I'm fresh out of dignity. Hold on. She didn't get the chance to protest further. Superman moved. The world blurred. Walls became streaks of light. Alarms became distant echoes. He wove through the station's corridors like a comet, dodging security drones and panicking crew with impossible grace. Vera's stomach lurched. No being should move this fast. And yet, despite the speed, she didn't feel a single jolt. He was careful. Pathetic, she told herself. He pities you. They burst into a maintenance hangar just as the first Zarathian shock troopers breached the airlock. Superman didn't hesitate. He kicked a rusted fuel canister into their path, then breathed, a controlled gust of freezing air that flash froze the metal in their boots. The troopers cursed as they stumbled, immobilized. Vera stared. That was cheating. He winked. I prefer creative problem solving. A dropship sat in the hangar, its engines still warm from a recent supply run. Superman ducked inside, settling Vera into the co-pilot's seat with far more care than she deserved. She scowled. You're stealing the ship now. Borrowing, he corrected, firing up the thrusters. We'll return it, with bullet holes in it. Depends on how polite they are when they chase us. The ship roared to life, lifting just as another squad of Zarathians stormed the hangar. Plasma fire scorched the hull as Superman punched the throttle, sending them spiraling into open space. Vera gripped the seat, not because she was scared, obviously, but because her body still wasn't responding right. The paralysis was fading, but slowly, too slowly. Superman glanced at her. You okay? I'm fantastic, she deadpanned. Just enjoying my involuntary vacation with a criminal. He chuckled, first time for everything. The stars stretched into hyperspace streaks as the ship jumped to light speed, leaving the Zarathians and the station behind. Silence settled over the cockpit, thick and heavy. Vera studied him, really studied him. Superman wasn't like the humans in the propaganda vids, weak, fearful, disorganized. He moved like a predator, spoke like a king, and his eyes. No, she shut that thought down. Why? She finally asked. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. Because you needed help. I'm your enemy. You were left to die. His voice softened. That makes you a victim, not an enemy. Something twisted in her chest. She looked away. Your optimism is disgusting. Yeah, he said, smiling. I get that a lot. The ship hummed around them, a fragile metal bubble between the void and whatever came next. Vera exhaled, long and slow. This was a mistake. She should sabotage the ship. Should betray him the second she could move properly. Should. But for now, she just watched the stars and the man who'd stolen her from death's grip like it was nothing. And if her heartbeat stuttered when his hand briefly covered hers on the console, well, that was just the adrenaline. The stolen dropship shuddered as it dropped out of light speed, its engines groaning like an old man waking from a deep sleep. Outside the viewport, a massive Zarathian dreadnought loomed, a jagged obsidian fortress bristling with plasma cannons. Vera's fingers twitched against the armrest, her body slowly remembering how to obey her again. Not fast enough. You're insane, she said flatly. Superman adjusted the ship's trajectory, avoiding a patrol drone with a lazy flick of the controls. I prefer goal-oriented. They'll skin you alive if they catch you. Good thing I'm hard to catch. He shot her a look, all blue eyes and infuriating confidence. Besides, you need those nanites. Unless you like being carried everywhere. She bared her teeth. I liked you better when you were silent. He laughed, and the sound did something irritating to her pulse. The ship's scanners beeped, a warning. 3 fighter drones, closing fast. Vera tensed. You're about to be very unsilent. Superman didn't flinch. He punched the throttle, sending the dropship into a dizzying spiral. Plasma bolts streaked past the cockpit, close enough to scorch the paint. Vera gripped her seat. Are you trying to get us killed? Nope. He flipped the switch, and the cargo bay doors blew open, venting a cloud of spare parts into the drone's path. The machine swerved, colliding in a shower of sparks. Just being efficient. She stared at him. That was actually clever. I have my moments. The dreadnought grew larger, its docking bay yawning open like a beast's maw. Superman guided the ship inside, slipping past the security scans with eerie calm. Vera's stomach twisted. This was suicide. Even if he somehow stole the nanites, they'd never escape. And yet, some traitorous part of her believed he'd do it. The ship settled onto the deck with a thud. Superman stood, stretching like a man about to take a stroll. Stay here. She scoffed. Where would I go? He smirked. Good point. Then he was gone, a blur of red and blue vanishing into the ship's shadows. Vera exhaled, flexing her fingers, still weak, still useless, pathetic. Minutes crawled by. The ship's console beeped occasionally, counting down to inevitable discovery. She imagined Superman getting caught, torn apart by Zorathian shock troops. And the thought made her chest tighten. Stupid. A noise at the airlock. She tensed, ready to fight even if all she could do was glare. The door slid open. Superman stepped inside, holding a sleek metal case. Got it. She blinked. That's it. No alarms? No blood? He shrugged. I'm stealthy when I want to be. You're impossible. So I've been told. He popped the case open, revealing a vial of shimmering silver liquid. Zorathian nanites, the finest in the Empire. Now hold still. She eyed the needle in his hand. If you stab me with that, I will bite you. Duly noted. His grip was firm but careful as he pressed the injector to her neck. The nanites flooded her veins, cold and electric. Vera gasped as her nerves screamed back to life, muscles twitching, synapses firing. Strength rushed through her like a tidal wave. She could move again. And the first thing she did was lunge for Superman's throat. He caught her wrist effortlessly, eyebrows raised. Wow. Thank you must mean something else in Zorathian. She snarled, but there was no real heat in it. This changes nothing. Aha! He didn't let go. His palm was warm against her skin. You're welcome. For a heartbeat, they were frozen there, close enough that she could see the flecks of lighter blue in his eyes, like sunlight through ice. Then the ship's alarm screamed. Superman sighed. Right on schedule. Vera yanked her hand back, ignoring the way her skin tingled. You triggered the alarms. Not on purpose. He dashed to the controls, firing up the engines. But we might want to leave. Now. The docking bay doors began to grind shut. Plasma turrets swiveled toward them. Vera slid into the co-pilot's seat, her hands flying over the console. I'm taking the guns. Superman grinned. Knew you'd come around. She shot him a glare. Shut up and fly. The ship rocketed forward, guns blazing. Vera picked off the turrets with surgical precision, her body singing with renewed power. Superman wove through the closing doors with inches to spare, the dreadnought's fury fading behind them. As the stars stretched into hyperspace, Vera leaned back, exhaling. Alive. Thanks to him. She glanced at Superman, who was humming under his breath like this was just another day. And maybe for him it was. You're insufferable, she muttered. He grinned. But you're starting to like it. She didn't deny it. The stolen dropship groaned as it hurtled through space, its hull still warm from near-miss plasma fire. Behind them, the Zorathian dreadnought grew smaller, but not nearly fast enough. Vera's fingers danced across the ship's controls, rerouting power to the engines with the warrior's precision. They're launching fighters, she muttered. Of course they are. Superman leaned back in the pilot's seat, absurdly calm for a man with half the Zorathian Navy on his tail. Think they're mad about the nanites? Oh, I'm sure they'll send a thank you note. She shot him a glare that could melt steel. After they vaporize us. He chuckled, and the sound did something irritating to her pulse, like a malfunctioning thruster, unpredictable and annoyingly persistent. The first wave of fighters opened fire. Superman yanked the controls hard left, sending the ship into a spiraling dive that made the artificial gravity stutter. Vera's stomach lurched, but she refused to grab the armrests. A warrior does not clutch. You fly like a drunken asteroid miner, she snapped. You're welcome to take over, he said, dodging another plasma burst with infuriating ease. Vera scowled. She could fly better, but not with her body still humming from the nanites adjustments, every nerve ending buzzing like a live wire. The comms crackled to life. Surrender the traitor and the thief, and your deaths will be quick. Superman sighed. Always with the ultimatums. He tapped the console, opening a channel. Sorry, busy right now. Maybe next lifetime? Vera stared at him. Are you trying to make them shoot us harder? The answering missile lock alarm said yes. Superman's hands moved in a blur, flipping switches, overriding safeties. Hold on to something. Woo. The ship spun, flipping end over end as a missile screamed past. Superman hit the thrusters at the exact wrong, or exactly right moment, letting the explosion's shockwave catapult them forward. Vera's teeth rattled. I hate you. He grinned. No, you don't. The stars blurred as they hit light speed again, but not before a final, parting shot from the dreadnought grazed their hull. The ship shuddered, warning lights flaring across every panel. Superman winced. That might be a problem. Vera was already moving, her body obeying her perfectly now. She tore open an access panel, scowling at the fried circuitry. We've got maybe 3 jumps left before this heap disintegrates. Plenty of time, he said, too cheerful for a man inches from cosmic dismemberment. She wanted to strangle him, and maybe, in some secret corner of her mind, do something else entirely. Traitorous thoughts. The ship dropped out of light speed near a derelict mining station, a skeletal thing orbiting a dead star. Superman guided them into a shaky landing, the ship groaning in protest. Silence settled, thick and heavy. Vera exhaled, rolling her shoulders. The nanites had done their job. She felt alive, every sense sharpened. Too sharp, maybe, when she could smell the ozone on Superman's cape, the faint warmth of his skin. So, she said, too casually, what now, oh fearless leader? He stretched, his cape draping over the pilot's seat like spilled ink. Now we find out why the Zarathians wanted you dead badly enough to chase us across 3 sectors. Her spine stiffened. They didn't want me dead. They just didn't care if I lived. Superman studied her, his gaze too knowing. Same difference. A beat. Vera looked away first. Weakness. Again. The mining station creaked around them, a graveyard of forgotten industry. Superman stood, offering her a hand. Coming. She ignored it. I can walk on my own now, remember? Shame, he said, smiling. I was getting used to carrying you. Her cheeks burned. Damnable human phrases, layered with meanings she refused to unpack. They stepped onto the station, the air stale and metallic. Vera kept her strides even, her posture perfect. But her pulse betrayed her, thrumming too fast under her skin. Superman walked beside her, close enough that his cape occasionally brushed her arm, like an accident, probably. You know, he said, voice light, for someone who hates me, you haven't tried to stab me yet. Give it time, she muttered. He laughed, and the sound echoed in the hollow station, bouncing off rusted pipes and abandoned machinery. For a moment, it almost felt like they were the only 2 beings in the universe. And maybe, just maybe, that thought didn't terrify her as much as it should have. Then the shadows moved. A dozen figures stepped forward, not Zarathians, rogues, rebels, and at their head, a face Vera hadn't seen in years. Her breath caught. Hello, sister, said the traitor prince, his smile sharp as a knife. Miss me? Superman sighed. You couldn't have just left us to the warships, huh? Vera's hands curled into fists. The rogue Zarathians moved like shadows given form, their armor dulled to avoid reflection, their weapons humming with restrained energy. At their center stood the traitor prince, Kale, second son of the emperor, exiled for crimes even Vera didn't fully know. His grin was all teeth. Look at you, the great Commander Vera, brought low by a human. Superman crossed his arms, brought alive, actually. Kale's golden eyes flicked to him, amused. Ah, the famous Superman. We've heard stories. Hope they made me sound tall. Vera's fingers twitched toward the knife at her belt. What do you want, Kale? What do I want? He spread his hands, the gesture theatrical. To reunite with my favorite executioner, of course. She didn't flinch. She'd killed for the Empire. She'd killed well. You're wasting our time. No, Kale's smile faded. I'm offering you a choice. Join us, or die with him when the Empire catches up. The silence that followed was heavier than a black hole. Superman tilted his head. So, just to clarify, this is the part where you reveal your evil plan, right? Kale sighed. You humans and your narratives. He snapped his fingers. The rebels parted, revealing a hologram, a weapon, massive and humming with unstable energy. The Empire's new toy. One blast, and it reduces a planet to dust. Vera's blood ran cold. She knew that design, her design. Superman's voice was dangerously calm. Let me guess, you stole it. We liberated it, Kale corrected, before the Emperor could test it on some backwater world full of creatures he deemed unworthy. His gaze slid to Superman. Like yours. Vera's stomach twisted. She'd known the Empire was ruthless. But this. Superman stepped forward. So what's the play? You blow up the Emperor, take his throne, and suddenly you're the good guy. Kale's laugh was sharp. There are no good. The stolen ship hummed through the void, its engines groaning like an old beast pushed too hard. Outside the viewport, stars streaked past, endless and indifferent. Vera sat stiffly in the co-pilot's seat, her fingers tracing the edge of her knife. The Emperor's words still echoed in her skull. Erased, forgotten. Superman pretended not to notice her brooding. Badly. So, he said, too casually, what's the Zorathian equivalent of witness protection? She didn't look at him. We shoot the witnesses. Ah, efficient. He tapped the navigation console. We could always try Earth. You'd hate it. Too much sunlight. Not enough murder. Her lips twitched. Damn him. Tempting. Silence settled between them. Thick, but not uncomfortable. The ship's systems beeped occasionally, the only sound besides their breathing. Then Superman sighed. You know they're wrong, right? Who? Everyone who left you behind. His voice was quiet, firm, like he was stating a simple fact. The sky is blue. Fire burns. You matter. Vera's chest tightened. She focused on her knife, the way the dim light caught its edge. Sentiment is a luxury warriors can't afford. Good thing we're not warriors right now. She finally glanced at him. What are we then? He met her gaze, his eyes that impossible shade of blue. Alive. And just like that, the air between them changed. Vera looked away first. You're insufferable. You keep saying that. He grinned. Starting to think you like it. She should have stabbed him. She definitely should have stabbed him. Instead, she found herself studying the way his cape pulled over the armrest, how his shoulders filled out that ridiculous suit. Weakness. Again. The ship's proximity alarm blared, shattering the moment. Superman cursed, hands flying over the controls. We got company. On the scanner, 3 Imperial interceptors, closing fast. Vera's muscles coiled, battle ready. Options. Well, we could surrender. No. Fight? Better. Or, he said, flashing that infuriating smile, we could do something stupid. She groaned. Why do I even ask? Superman yanked the throttle, sending the ship into a nosedive toward a nearby gas giant. The interceptors followed, plasma fire streaking past the hull. Vera gripped her seat. You're going to kill us. Nah, he winked, just making it look that way. The ship plunged into the planet's upper atmosphere, turbulence rattling their bones. Outside, swirling storms of violet and gold swallowed them whole. The interceptors broke off. Smart pilots knew better than to follow. Superman leveled the ship, skimming the gas giant's turbulent skies. See? Stupid works. Vera exhaled, her pulse still racing. You're impossible. And yet, he said, voice dropping to a murmur, here you are, still with me. The ship's interior felt suddenly smaller, warmer. Vera could count the flecks of starlight reflected in his eyes if she wanted to. She didn't, obviously. Then the comms crackled. A new voice, rough, unfamiliar. Identify yourselves or be vaporized. Superman groaned. Can we ever catch a break? On the view screen, a massive, patchwork cruiser, its hull bristling with weapons. Not Imperial, pirate. Vera almost smiled. Finally, someone worth fighting. Superman glanced at her, amused. You're enjoying this. Don't be ridiculous. She checked her weapons, the lie smooth as blade work. I just prefer honest enemies. He laughed, bright and warm against the storm-dark skies. Remind me never to play cards with you. The pirate ship loomed closer, its docking tractor beam locking onto them. Superman leaned back, resigned. So, plan? Vera met his gaze, feeling something dangerously like anticipation. Improvise. The docking bay smelled like engine grease and bad decisions. Vera stepped off the ship first, her boots clicking against the rusted metal deck. Superman followed, his cape fluttering just enough to be dramatic. A dozen pirates leveled weapons at them. At the front stood their captain, a hulking reptilian with scars across his snout and a plasma rifle slung over one shoulder. Well, Superman muttered, this is cozy. The reptilian growled. You're in my skies now, little. Oh, put the guns down, Rilgor. The voice came from above. A catwalk creaked as a figure dropped down, landing light as stardust. The pirate queen. She was humanoid, mostly. Amber eyes, dark skin etched with glowing tattoos, and a smile sharp enough to flay flesh. Her gaze swept over them, lingering on Superman just a beat too long. So, she purred. The Man of Steel himself. Heard you were dead. Rumors of my demise, he said dryly, are greatly exaggerated. Vera's fingers twitched toward her knife. You know each other. The Queen laughed. Oh, we go way back. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing Superman's shoulder. Don't we, Cal? Superman didn't flinch. Missed you too, Nix. Vera decided, right then, that she hated the way Nix's nails looked against his cape. Hated it violently. Nix finally turned to her. And you must be the infamous Commander Vera, the Empire's favorite butcher. Former butcher, Vera corrected coldly. Even better, Nix grinned. Traitors always throw the best parties. Superman cleared his throat. As fun as this reunion is, we got Imperial warships on our tail. Oh, I know. Nix waved the hand. The view screen flickered to life, showing the gas giant's edge, where 3 Imperial cruisers lurked waiting. They're adorable when they're trying to be subtle. Vera studied the screen. You're not worried. Why would I be? Nix leaned against the console, her tattoos pulsing faintly. I've got something they want. Superman sighed. Let me guess. Us. Bingo. Her grin widened. But don't worry, I'm feeling generous today. Vera didn't trust generosity, or pirates, or the way Nix's hip brushed Superman's when she moved. What's the price? Simple. Nick's eyes gleamed. Help me steal something. Then we all go our merry ways. Superman crossed his arms. What kind of something? The kind that makes emperors very nervous. She tapped the screen. An image appeared, a sleek, silver device, humming with unstable energy. Recognize it, Commander? Vera's blood ran cold. It was another weapon, her design. Superman glanced between them. I'm guessing this is bad. Oh, it's delightful, Nick said cheerfully. One pulse, and it turns any ship's systems to slag. Perfect for a girl who likes to make entrances. Vera imagined very briefly tapping her. It was a pleasant thought. Superman rubbed his temples. Let me get this straight. You want us to break into an Imperial outpost, steal a super weapon, and not die horribly. Basically. No. Next pouted. You're no fun anymore. Vera stepped forward. Where is it? Superman blinked. Wait, you're actually considering this? It's my design. Her voice was steel. My responsibility. And maybe, just maybe, a chance to spit in the Emperor's eye. Nyx clapped her hands. See? She gets it. Superman looked between them, exasperated. I'm surrounded by suicidal women. Flatterer, Nix said, winking. Vera's knife found its way into her hand. Try that again, slowly. The pirates tensed. Superman sighed. Nix just laughed. Oh, I like her. She turned, sashaying toward the door. Rest up. We move at night cycle. As she left, her tail, literal and otherwise, flicked Superman's cape. Vera's grip on her knife tightened. Superman leaned closer, his voice low. You know this is a trap, right? Obviously. And you're still going. She met his gaze. You don't have to follow. He smiled, small and private. Yeah, I do. And if her pulse jumped at that, well, the knife hit it nicely. The ship's lights dimmed, casting long shadows. Somewhere in the distance, Nick's laughter echoed. Superman nudged Vera's shoulder. For the record, I'd take your murderous scowling over her flirting any day. Vera sniffed. Good. The Imperial outpost hung in the void like a spider in its web, all sharp angles and silent menace. Vera crouched in the shadow of Nick's stolen shuttle, her breath steady, her pulse calm, mostly. Superman peered over her shoulder, his warmth seeping through her armor. Remind me why we're trusting the Pirate Queen again. We're not, Vera muttered. We're using her. Nix's voice crackled in their earpieces. Flattered, darling? Now move. Vera rolled her eyes. She definitely wasn't jealous. That would be absurd. They slipped through the outpost defenses like ghosts, Superman's powers bypassing scanners, Vera's knowledge guiding them through blind spots. The halls were too quiet, too empty. This, Superman whispered, is definitely a trap. Vera didn't argue. Traps could be sprung both ways. They reached the vault, a massive door humming with energy. Nick's intel had been good, at least. The weapon sat inside, gleaming on its pedestal. Superman frowned. That's smaller than I expected. Size doesn't matter, Vera said absently, already working the lock. He choked. What? She realized what she'd said a second too late. Her ears burned. Shut up. His grin was obnoxious. Make me. And if she imagined, briefly, how she might, well, the mission came first. The vault hissed open. The weapon pulsed, its core swirling like liquid mercury. Vera reached for it. And the door slammed shut behind them. Surprise, Nex crooned over the comms. Turns out I do like Imperial bribes. Who knew? Alarms wailed. Outside, boots pounded toward them. Superman sighed, called it. Vera snatched the weapon. Later. Gloat later. The first wave of Imperial troops burst in. Vera moved like lightning, her knife finding throats, her fists crushing armor. Superman was a blur of red and blue, his punches sending soldiers flying. But more kept coming. Plan. Superman ducked a plasma bolt. Vera activated the weapon. This. She slammed it to the ground. The pulse hit like a supernova. Lights died. Guns fizzed. The entire outpost went dark. In the sudden silence, Superman blinked. Huh. Vera grabbed his wrist. Run. They bolted, the outpost groaning around them. Somewhere Nix was probably cursing. Vera smiled at the thought. They reached the docking bay just as the emergency lights flickered on. Their stolen shuttle was gone, but Nix's ship remained, its ramp down like an invitation. Superman hesitated. This feels like another trap. Obviously. Vera shoved him forward. Move, hero. They boarded. The ship shuddered as it launched, barely missing the outpost's collapsing shields. On the view screen, the Imperial cruisers floundered, their systems fried. Nex lounged in the pilot's seat, grinning. Miss me? Vera had her knife at the pirate's throat before she could blink. Give me one reason not to space you. How about I left the engine codes in the system? Nix tapped the console. The weapon schematics flashed up. Merry traitor mass. Superman peered at the screen. You gave us the kill switch. And the recipe. Nix winked. Empires fall faster when everyone's armed. Vera slowly lowered her knife. Why? Nix's smile faded. Let's just say I like watching tyrants squirm. She jerked her chin at Superman. Also, he's cute when he's righteous. Annoying, but cute. Superman groaned. Can we please focus on not dying? The ship jumped to light speed, leaving the chaos behind. In the quiet that followed, Vera exhaled. It was over, or just beginning. Superman nudged her. So, Earth. She looked at him, really looked, at the way his hair stuck up from the fight, the stupid hope in his eyes, the warmth of him that had no business in the cold void of space. Temporarily, she grumbled. His smile could have powered a star. And if hers softened, just a little, well, no one had to know. Nix gagged. Oh, I liked you better when you were stabby. Vera flicked her off. Somewhere in the dark, the Emperor raged. Somewhere ahead, Earth waited. And in between, just them. And maybe, for now, that was enough.